Hey, hello everyone, it's Victor the Computer Savvy here and welcome to my YouTube channel. So today's topic was Introduction to Web Administration. Yeah, a lot of persons they want to learn the skills of how to program websites or for the web, and they just feel okay. I want to learn how to create a website so I can start making money, so I can start making cool cash. Yeah, that's a great idea. But in reality, it doesn't just work that way. The reason why Facebook makes so much money from Facebook is because Facebook actually is the number one website in the world. So most times anything that is number one tends to, be the best and also tends to have money and stuff like that. So having a website out there does not mean you can just start making money immediately, which possible you possibly yes you can start making money, but not just immediately. You have to have some potentials, some characteristics in your website where you can start making money from that website. Okay, but today just introduction to web administration, so you have the knowledge of how the web works, how a website works in general, so that you can then kick off from there. Yeah. So we'll be looking at the internet and we'll be looking at server, web server, DNS, which is domain name server, and the web browser. Yeah. So back in this early 60s, yeah, if I'm not mistaken, the internet was created more for the military. I think for the military to be so if I'm not mistaken also. It was created back then in 1960s for the military to use for communication, so that should in case there's a war, you can as well the soldiers can as well communicate with each other. Because for instance, if they're in a particular location, they have this kind of router available there, and they have another router they need to communicate in another country or in another state. So the router is serve as a means of communication. So they may be in this location, there's a router here, and they need to communicate with another military or with another soldier in this location. They have to transmit information from one spot to the other. And if, for instance, they throw a nuclear weapon here, and the nuclear weapon tends to destroy this router, they can't actually communicate. So that's how they came up with the idea of the internet, where they could have multiple routers in different location, so that if a particular router goes down, let's say for instance this two of this router goes down, they still have some router standing that they can use to communicate. Look at the whole idea of how the internet came out. So okay, then the web it's actually located or reside on the internet. Okay, just imagine the web being a software seated on the internet. Yeah. So in the internet is like a bunch of connected computers. In other words, bunch of connected routers makes up the internet. While the web it's seated is a technology made to be seated on the internet. All right. Back then, we do have different software that is made for create to open that is made for specific functions. We have the Microsoft Word for Word document, and we have the Microsoft Excel for data analysis and data spreadsheet and so on. And a group of people called the W3C World Wide Consortium. They came together to say, okay, let's create a particular file that can be read by a particular app all over the world, or let's create a particular um, format of a way to create a particular file. So that's how they came about to create something called HTML. Or they all came together. They create a standard of which a particular document can be created, because HTML is a form of a document. Okay, because after you create your HTML, you always save it as the .html extension. So it's also a form of a document, or let's say a form of a file. So those group of people came together to say, okay, let's create what we call HTML, a type of document that can be created all over the world with a specific standard. So learning HTML is like you're learning the standard you need to know in creating HTML file. So they came together, create a standard on how you can create HTML file, and that file you created can be read all over the world with an application called the web browser. So that's how the idea of this web program came about. Okay, that's that for the internet. It's just a bunch of connected routers communicating with each other. Now I'm going to talk about servers, or let's say DNS. So DNS stands for domain name server. One thing about you should know about computer is computer does not really understand what we know as www.facebook.com or www.twitter.com and all of those domain names we know about. So what happens is this: when you go to your web browser and you type in www.facebook.com, what actually happens is this: is that your web browser points that domain name to what we call the DNS, which I've made mention as the domain name server. It goes all the way to the domain name server, asks, "Hello, please can you get me the IP address of this domain name?" Because the computer does not really understand our language. All they understand is just numbers. So it goes all the way down to the domain name server and tells the domain name server, I have this domain name, for instance, www.facebook.com, and the domain name server take that name it has and it checks its own server and say, okay, yeah, this is the IP address of that domain name. Then it gives it to the web browser. Then the web browser goes use that IP address to locate the web page of that particular website you're trying to visit. So it could be when you type on, for instance, you type in www.facebook.com, the web browser takes that name because it does not understand what that means. It takes that name to the domain name server, and the domain name server checks its record and say, okay, the IP address of this domain you're looking for is, for instance, it could be 192.224.3.1. I'm just giving an instance. That may not be a real IP address. An instance of how an IP address looks like could be a string of numbers separated by a dot, 192.3.4.1. Okay, this is, you can then say, okay, this is the IP address of the particular domain name you're trying to visit. Then it gives it response to the browser by giving the browser the IP address. The IP address, which stands for Internet Protocol, is actually a location of where a particular website is seated on the internet. So the domain name server fetches the IP address and gives it to the web browser. Then the web browser uses that IP address to go to where the web page is located. That is the job of the domain name server. And also we have the web server. Yes, the web server is like when your internet browser has gotten the IP address, your web browser has gotten the IP address from the domain name server, it then goes to where the website is located. So where the website is located, it's on a web server. So when it gets to where the web server is, it's the job of the web server to then feed back to your web browser the index page of that website. So in the particular web server, what we have seated on the web server is your files of the website that is hosted in that particular web server. So it, for instance, it fetches all the files you're looking for. Let's take for instance, you go to www.facebook.com, then your web browser goes to the domain name to get the IP address of that domain name. And after getting the IP address, then the browser uses the IP address to locate where the website is located on the web internet. Okay, so after you have gotten the IP address, it then uses the IP address to go to the direct location of where the site is located. And where the site is located is actually seated on the internet inside the web server. So the web server then fetch the index file of that website to your browser. Then your browser prints out the index page to you on your computer or on your mobile phone. Okay. This may not really be too, you may not really understand what I'm trying to say, but as time goes on, you then to understand what I'm trying to explain to you, because by the time we start getting our little code, then you understand what I'm trying to say. All right, so that's the work of the web server. As the name implies, it serves when your web browser then gets to where the website is located, then the web server serves your web browser the index page of that particular website. Then the web browser will then interpret the code in the in the index page and show it to you on the web browser on your computer or on the mobile phone. That's what is meant by the web server. Yeah. So those are just the main idea of how the internet works. The internet, it's a bunch of connected computers or bunch of connected routers communicating with each other. Then the website is an idea on the internet. Okay, so as an idea on the internet, when you try to get a website, when you try to visit a website, what actually happens is that you type in the domain name in your web browser. After typing in the domain name in your web browser, the web browser goes to the domain name server, so get the IP address of that website you're trying to create. Because if we as a human cannot easily memorize all the bunch of IP addresses of different websites that we know, because it's actually complicated. Come to think of it, for instance, a web browser IP address could be 224.1.0.1. Then that's for one website. Then you have to memorize another one for another website for different websites. Then Netflix has its own IP address. Facebook has its own IP address. Twitter has its own IP addresses. So keeping all those bunch of numbers in one's head is not really easy. Well, we can easily just keep domain name on our head. So that's why they came about the idea of having a domain name. Then the domain name is then later converted to an IP address by our web browser. That does not concern us. All we need to know is to remember the IP address of a particular, sorry, all we need to know is to remember the domain name of a particular website. And it is the job of the web browser to convert that domain name server to an IP address. And the IP address is then used by the browser also to locate where the website is located on the internet. So when it knows where it's then located, it goes to where it's located on the which is always located on the web server. Then the web server then respond by giving the web browser the index page of that website. All right, those are just the basic idea of how the website works and the whole idea of the web in administration. All right, so in our next episode, I'll be looking diving us deep into HTML, where we get to probably start to code. But I was also going to let you know what the do's and don'ts of what you need to know in the area of programming, because a lot of person tends to um, want to learn programming and later end up not being able to learn programming, because there's a lot of things that they're supposed to know before they just start jumping into coding. Because you have to know what pseudocode, you have to have a prototype, you have to write different wireframes before you can successfully have a code or have a program done. So if you've not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel. Well, I assure you, you're going to get a lot of updates on how to program and as well different tech talks coming up. All right. Thank you for watching this video. Please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. Stay tuned for my next video. See you soon. Have a nice day. Bye.